price action for the entire crypto market, but we're not going to be staying in that mode for long. No, 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 no. In fact, I'm going to give you a ton of reasons from lots of reputable chart analysts, including a few of the most well-known in the entire crypto space, reason to be extremely optimistic that yes, the best part of the cycle we've all been waiting for, that euphoric blow off top, it is coming. And for XRP, that could mean some truly wild and life-changing things for XRP holders. In fact, one analyst I'll highlight in this video says that $20 absolutely remains the primary price target for this market cycle. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. Just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. Now, as I record this video, it is 6:14 p.m. Central Time, Wednesday, August 27th, 2025. XRP is $2.97. And so the last couple days, it's been fluttering above and below the $3 mark. No change here, at least at the time that I'm recording this. Bitcoin at $111,464. But as I cited at the outset, we will not be staying here forever, certainly not for long. If most analysts are correct, there's no way we're going to be stuck in this. I know sometimes it can feel like an eternity when stuff like this is going on, but it's going to pass. And you typically get quick price action as you get closer and closer to the end of the market cycle. And so some of the most respected names in crypto, some of the most well-known names out there, some of the most successful investors, including many who run investment firms in the crypto space, they all know that if history rhymes with itself, and it almost certainly will, things are about to get crazy. And so there's this post from Dan Tapiero. He's the founder and CEO of 50T Funds. It's a firm that invests in mid to late stage crypto firms. So they're not a venture capitalist firm per se, but they do invest exclusively in the crypto space. And he knows what's coming here. So he shared this post, which is the entire crypto asset class excluding Bitcoin and ETH. That's what this chart is. It's everything else. And he noted the following. He said, unchanged from the 2021 peak and not that much above the 2018 peak. And so you can see what he's talking about. And by the way, it just happens to be the case that a number of analysts over the last week have highlighted basically the same chart. And you can see that this thing has been trading in an increasingly narrow range for the last several years, which is what you would hope and expect if you want an alt season. And because look, the longer something consolidates, the greater the force with which it bursts when it finally goes. And you can see what he's talking about here. So where I'm moving my mouse right now, for those of you on the screen, that's where we are now. Here's the 2021 peak. Not that different, is it? And I can see the point he's making too here. Here's the peak for 2018. And yeah, it's higher, but not like insanely higher. And then he points out that there are a bunch of tailwinds at this point. And he wrote, 7 years ago, there were no stables, no DeFi, no yield, no Solana, no NFTs, no DEXs, no real-world assets, no AI, no prediction market, etc., etc. Okay, the cut of his jib is correct. It's not entirely true. Obviously, decentralized exchanges have existed for over a decade now. In fact, the XRP Ledger has the world's first ever built-in decentralized exchange. But he's maybe he's in his mind, he's thinking, okay, but these things weren't really popular, and so would have only marginally at best impacted the price. And then he said real world assets. Okay, well, 7 years ago, yes, things were tokenized. In fact, gold was tokenized on the XRP Ledger literally 10 years ago. So it's not that there were none. I think this is my suspicion that he's talking more so about, okay, those weren't narratives that weren't broadly adopted at that point, and so he's saying there's more reason for prices to go higher here. And I would also add on top of that, you have the United States pro-crypto for the first time in history, the largest capital market on the planet. Yeah, that's a big deal also. And then he says the digital asset economy growth not priced in, alt season ahead. And it's hard to argue with that. So all the chart analyst type, they're going to share, and they have been recently, like I said, many chart analysts over the last week have shared basically the same chart here, showing, guys, altcoins coiled up, gonna go here. There are also all sorts of real-world fundamental reasons to believe the best is yet ahead, and the timing just makes sense here. Now, here's a post from an analyst I'm not familiar with named K. Dean, and he wrote, we are off the M2 money supply trend line short term. And so I've noted, and I got this from Raoul Paul, Raoul Paul's noted that close to 90% of the time, the price of Bitcoin, and thus the entire crypto asset class, which moves in tandem, it moves in tandem with global M2. Bitcoin follows global M2 directionally about 90% of the time. Now, you could zoom in on any small segment and be like, wow, there's no correlation here. Like, look where I'm moving my mouse right here. You could say it there. You could move over here and be like, wow, there's no correlation. And then you could look over here and like, wow, there's no correlation. Any little short period, like you could say no correlation. But then if you zoom out and if you have at least one human eyeball connected to a brain, you can see if you zoom out over a longer time period, of course there's correlation here. So when K. Dean here writes, we're off of this short term, well, okay, but that's consistently the case. Like I said, zoom in on almost any little really short time period here, and you could make that case. I'm just saying it doesn't matter and this is normal. This doesn't mean that there's some sort of decoupling from global M2. Absolutely not. And so Raoul Paul responded to this, and he's the one that has made this particular metric particularly popular in the world of crypto because the correlation is just so perfect, consistently for over a decade. It's very powerful here. And Raoul Paul, of course, is the founder and CEO of Real Vision and global macro investor, former Goldman Sachs executive, and an XRP holder, by the way. And he said, here's the original version, so that's what's on your screen right now. And of course, Bitcoin, you can see that these don't line up time-wise, and that's because there's a 12-week lag on Bitcoin. That's the only reason. But he says, here's the original version updated. We always said it wouldn't continue to exactly mirror, but contextually should be correct. We've had decent-sized gaps the other way around in the past, too, and they ended up resolving by Bitcoin catching up to M2. So, again, it doesn't mean anything's broken here. This is actually very normal, and you can find tons of instances like this going back literally over 10 years. It didn't mean that the correlation was then gone. Just to be clear, it doesn't even make logical sense that it would be gone. But there is this idea of lengthening cycles, and I'm not saying I buy into this. I don't know. It's, the guys that say that, fine, some percentage chance they could be correct. You know, Raoul Paul, though, not exactly a fly-by-night individual. There's a reason that he has 1.2 million followers on X. He's well-respected and highly intelligent, and he has an entire career in traditional finance, leaning into crypto ultimately. He actually does think there's a reasonable chance that you're going to see this cycle run into like halfway through 2026. And he's one of only a minority of analysts that I follow that is arguing that this is something that you should be taken seriously. Most analysts that I follow do not think that. So sometimes, and I'll note, sometimes minority opinions can be correct. And sometimes they are. So if he is, I won't be surprised that it's coming from him at least, and he's articulated reasons. It would be too far outside the scope of this video to delve in, although I have highlighted his perspective on that in the past. But he's not the only one that thinks that things actually could be taking a bit longer. And if that's the case, you could see quite the climb for XRP, by the way, for like the next year. And again, I'm not saying I buy into this. I'm just sharing with you a couple diverse perspectives here from reputable analysts. And so TechDev, he seems to think this as well, and he's made multiple posts indicating that he does think this thing could run into next year. Again, it's a minority opinion. If the minority opinion is correct, good for them. All credit where it's due if they end up being proven correct. But most analysts that I follow think that we really are towards this very end of cycle phase where we're going to have that euphoric blow-off top sooner than later. But they're not just saying stuff because why the hell not? They actually have data behind their perspectives here. And so here's TechDev, 546,000 followers on X, very data-driven individual. And what he's showing here is Bitcoin and business cycles. The line up top, this white one, that's the price of Bitcoin going back basically since inception. You know, about 15 years ago. And on the bottom, you have business cycles. Now, business cycles, you know, that data that's on your screen right here, that's what's at the bottom of the screen with these bars, the red and then the green bars. That data comes from actual global economic data. So it would be things like production, trade, credit, all rolled into one signal that tracks when the economy is expanding or contracting. And Bitcoin cycles have lined up with it almost perfectly. So it's basically a macro signal that flips between expansion and contraction, which would be why you get the red and the green. And for red, it's up top when the price of Bitcoin would be peaking. If you're looking at the screen, you can see that. And I think that's just because he's like red because it's overheating would be my speculation why he chose the color red for this chart here. But yeah, like I said, it's basically just a macro signal. It's going to flip between expansion and contraction. But every cycle, bear markets end when the bars flip from red to green, and ramps last as long as the bars stay red, and the tops hit right at the peak of red. So the only thing different this time is that the green phase has stretched longer, which means the ramp will stretch longer too. And when we say ramp, we're just talking about the degree to which you get that momentum shift, it trending in the other direction. But here's the exciting part. So that powerful red expansion phase that drives Bitcoin's parabolic runs, it hasn't even started yet. Look at where the price of Bitcoin peaked each of the previous several cycles. It was when you had the business cycle red bars peak. That is when it happened every single time in history. We haven't even gotten to a single red bar. So why does this matter for XRP? Well, because every time Bitcoin enters its ramp phase, it pulls the entire market tide with it. That's when altcoins like XRP historically see their biggest explosive move. So if this cycle is just now lining up for Bitcoin, it could mean the stage is absolutely set, for XRP's breakout alongside with it, because again, the entire asset class moves in tandem. So that would not be surprising. And that's exactly what he's highlighting here. He said, what's actually different this time? Because he makes this, I'm not going to read the whole post, it's on your screen, but he's saying, so what is actually different? Well, it's what I just said. Green has been longer, this part where I'm moving my mouse, yes, it's longer in terms of time, and thus the ramp, if you want to call it that, has been longer. That's all. He says, red hasn't even started. It doesn't seem like most will be here. When it does, will you? So this is another analyst who's using data to come to the conclusion that this cycle's not peaking this year. It's peaking next year, maybe halfway through 2026. So I'm just sharing with you, it's a minority opinion, so far as I can tell. But these are not just random idiot people on the internet saying stupid things. These are highly informed, intelligent individuals with great multi-year track records saying something that happens to be a minority opinion. So take from that what you will. If they're correct, we're going to have not just an exciting next few weeks or months, but an exciting maybe next year, roughly, next 12 months from this point. So we'll see. Either way, like one thing that they don't agree on, or that they do agree on rather, is that the best is yet ahead. We're going to have that euphoric blow off top. So is it going to happen sooner rather than later? Well, we'll see, folks. Here's a post from Cointelegraph. They're sharing this video clip where Tom Lee was being interviewed, and Tom Lee, he's a what's the title? He's like a commentator on CNBC, but he's also more famously running Fundstrat, a very popular investment firm. He's very well known in crypto. He's got a pretty damn good track record himself. And he's talking about where Ethereum is going. And the reason I want to highlight this is not because I'm excited about Ethereum. I hold it, but I'm not excited about it. It's because I know what this might mean for XRP. And so here Cointelegraph wrote the following. Bullish. Tom Lee predicts Ethereum going to $5,500 in the next couple of weeks and $10,000 to $12,000 by the end of the year. Okay, if Ethereum's really going to 5,500, so that means that it's in price discovery at that point. It's barely peaked above. Very recently, it's created a couple new all-time highs, which is great to see. You would hope that would be happening at this stage of the market cycle. But if it starts going that direction, that's the type of thing that historically has set off the entire crypto asset class into crazy price discovery, like full-blown alt season ultimately here. And I will just say, if Ethereum really does peak at $12,000 by the end of this year, well, if XRP matches Ethereum in market cap, which there is historic precedent for, it has done that before, that would mean that XRP would be worth about $24. So that's why I say it's not crazy to think that you can get up to these really impressive double-digit prices for XRP if this happens. And you know what's really cool about that? So say Ethereum does get to $12,000 and XRP, instead of matching that market cap like it did a couple cycles ago, let's say it doesn't. Let's say it only reaches half of that market cap. So a lot of people would find that disappointing. That would still be $12 XRP, so it could be off by half compared to how it's historically behaved. in a highly competitive, end of cycle phase, and it would still be at $12. This is why I keep saying, like, these crazy high prices, or maybe some people think they're crazy. I don't think they're crazy. I think that they could come to pass. Now, I don't make price predictions myself. I admit I don't know where XRP price is going, but I don't think any of that's crazy. Way, way, way higher. You know who else is bullish is Credible Crypto here. He simply wrote this just this morning. Bitcoin looks like it wants $115,000. So he seems to think higher sooner rather than later. And then he also had this post this morning. He was responding to somebody who wrote, every time I look into XRP BTC chart, I feel my XRP bag is not enough. And why would that individual say that? Well, if you think your bag's not enough after looking at the chart, it's probably because you think that the price is going higher. And Credible Crypto has been indicating in recent days, yeah, he thinks that this thing's about to light up. He thinks that XRP is going to substantially outpace Bitcoin again this cycle. And so Credible Crypto said, don't worry, it's natural to feel this way when you look at the XRP BTC chart right now. So optimism still stands. Whatever's happened in the short term, even if by the time you're watching this, the price of XRP is a little bit lower, whatever, it doesn't matter. Higher time frame trend is intact. We're still going higher. Here's a post from Crypto Insight UK. He says, if XRP can start to close above $3.14, I think it will soon work its way up to the $3.40 level. Let's see what the American Open does to markets in 2 hours. So he still has that optimism. Now, this post is from this morning, and we haven't seen a lot of excitement in crypto world today. It's not just XRP. It has mostly been sideways price action. But, still take away from this post the fact that he thinks that this thing could go at any moment. Like, that hasn't changed. The crypto market, including XRP specifically, is absolutely primed. That could not be more obvious. And I see a lot of agreement on that point. Here's a post from Chart Analyst CW. He says, there aren't many high leverage short positions remaining in XRP. In other words, there's only a small amount of short positions left to stop the price rising. So, sounds good to me. This thing's pretty well teed up here. Here's a post from Chart Analyst Galaxy, and this is just from this morning. It's an XRP BTC chart. He says, green line has been a resistance on the XRP BTC pair for over 6 years. But now, looks like the timing is perfect, as breaking out will put us well into price discovery on the USD pair. So isn't it interesting that he's noticing this at the same time Credible Crypto is like, yeah, it looks like we're about to start moving here. And by the way, how many people have I highlighted? How many chart analysts have I noted just over like the last several days and have been arguing the same thing? That really, this thing's been going back like the better part of a decade. Some are pull back the chart even further and say 8 years on XRP BTC, which is true. Is it like 5 different chart analysts that I regularly follow have independently noticed this? And like, guys, this thing's really, really, really been consolidating for a long time. It's about time for this thing to blow. That's what they're all highlighting here. So it's just like last year we had XRP USD that finally broke free after consolidating almost 7 years. And then in November, it absolutely ran. Well, same concept here. This is XRP BTC instead, so it's a different chart. But when XRP substantially outpaces Bitcoin, like once it crosses over, what do you think that means for USD? Even if, obviously, it's more fun to look at what XRP is worth against a fiat currency. But still, what do you think that means? So yeah, it's going to rip Bitcoin to shreds. Because look, we haven't even had an all-time high since 2 cycles ago. If you're looking at the screen, you can see where I'm moving my mouse. Look at this. Look at that. We haven't had it since the first half of 2017, actually. So even though we got the all-time high for that cycle, January 4th, 2018, that was not a new all-time high against Bitcoin, actually. So we haven't had a new all-time high against Bitcoin since the first half of 2017. So what? Are we just never going to see that ever again? I'm not going to make that bet. I think we're ultimately going to see it higher at some point, my friends. Probably sooner rather than later. Here's a post from X-Force Global. He says, XRP, $20 remains the primary cycle target. XRP still faces strong resistance at the $4 level, but this does not alter the overall bullish outlook on the macro. So again, nothing's changed. I know people get beaten down and stuff's moving sideways or it's lower than when I bought it. Yeah, I get it. That's normal human nature, human emotions coming out. Your human emotions have nothing to do with whether or not the asset class, and in this case XRP specifically itself, is going to go higher or lower. And it's especially for when it matters, the remainder of this market cycle. Has nothing to do with that. And if you just if you look based on historic precedent, it makes sense to believe, yes, we're going way higher. And this is at a time when XRP's fundamentals have never been stronger. There's never been a better time to be an XRP holder. Here's a post from Mikey Bull Crypto, and he might have the most conservative price target for XRP out of anybody that I follow. I mean, if he's right, credit where it's due. Again, I don't pretend to know. I'm not a chart guy myself. But I'd be surprised and disappointed if this were actually true. But he said XRP blow off top, then cycle peak $5 to $8 targets. So, and he's not being trolly. Like, he is an XRP bull. He just has a really super conservative target. I would be shocked, folks, because XRP, before this cycle, its last all-time high, again, January 4th, 2018, at $3.35. So you're talking about getting somewhere in the range of maybe close to doubling it. Something like that, if he ends up being correct. So we consolidated like 2 market cycles, the better part of a decade, effectively. All for it to get a 2x compared to its previous all-time high? That I would be shocked. Why would it perform so poorly relative to Ethereum, for example? Why would Bitcoin at lower price points have a higher ROI than XRP with how much money has been invested in XRP to this point? It's hard to believe that, to be honest with you. So again, if he's right, I'll give credit where it's due. It's just these lower price expectations. I'm pretty skeptical of them, unless we have a black swan event. If that happens, well, then all bets off. But if there's no black swan event and the market just plays out like normal and there's euphoria and that things go, to think that XRP would